So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for smarter buildings. So great to have you with us this week. In case you're wondering who we are, the panelists here are listed on mondaylive.org. So go and check that out if you need to. Just a reminder that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And especially today and next week, as we sort of wind down the year, it'd be really great if we can make this as sort of interactive as possible. So please chime in because we'll be sort of having a sort of a freewheeling conversation between us, and we'd like you to join in. It being December, what we want to do this week and next week before we shut down for the year is we want to take a look at what has been happening this year in 2024, and next week we'll talk a lot more about next year and what we're anticipating next year. So that's kind of the two remaining weeks. We're going to structure that way. So this is our normal agenda for today. Before we get into that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Sinclair for an update from Automated Buildings. Ken, what's going on?
Thanks, Anto. Lots going on. We're hard at putting together our HR programs. We're starting to do the call outs and having the actual meetings with the moderators and speakers, which is always a lot of fun because then we've got these titles up there, but then that's actually what the program is going to get exactly about, gets decided on those meetings. So we're looking forward to that. So they're all set up within the next few weeks. So we're hard at that piece. I'm really excited about the program. I think we've got a great program that builds a lot on a lot of those discussions we've been having here on Monday Live. So happy about that. We have the summary of last Monday's meeting there in the IT OT convergence, how software is eating the building industry. And I think AI and Kelly did a good job of pulling that together, captured some good stuff. I'm still impressed that AI has the patience to listen to us all natter and actually pull some useful content out of these Monday Lives and actually do some summaries and stuff. So the line above that is interesting. Join us for the summation of the 2024. Basically, if you click on that, it basically opens all of the summaries of the Zooms, which is sort of the one place that I know that they're all together. So that might be useful for some of us. The other thing I'm starting to see that our sponsors are starting to use some of the words that we've been using on Monday Live for the last 3 years, is it? We've been online. And, sustainable value from buildings is one down at the bottom there. Keith's company is using a collection of AI agents trained for building performance and optimization. That's a great comment as well. On Wednesday, on our Wicked Wednesday meeting where we try to decide what it is we're going to do on Monday Live, we had a little chit chat about just the different ways that things are now going to be done using cloud native AI and just moving in that direction. So I've written a little bit of a satire, I think maybe there's a fork in the road, and I think we have to start thinking about it, that we can keep on doing what we've been doing, or we can start to look at how the world is changing and how everything is moving to cloud native open software, and builds heavily on the meeting that Rick went to in Salt Lake City. We linked to that in that little post, and I've also looking forward to have anybody want to add comments to it on LinkedIn. If you actually step on that fork, it takes you to the LinkedIn post. So you can jump in there and feedback your comments. Would love to have your comments on where you see that going. I'm seeing a different just a whole different way, different business models falling out of all of this. We've got everybody working in the same direction to basically move out from hard, heavy metal industries and take their offerings and making them very much software orientated. The software in the past was always contained inside of containers that were the hardware that supported the software. As we move into the cloud, we, in some ways, are not constrained is the word I was going to say, contained, but contained, but restrained. And we can basically write as much software as we need. We can use pieces of other software. And so it just gives us a whole new flexibility. And we're starting to see people walk across the floor, changing their business models from being the suppliers of heavy metal bits and pieces to being providing a service, providing a complete service. And I think we've got to get our heads around it. And that's what I'm saying the fork in the road is that you have to explore that and start thinking about how your company will turn into a technology company. We're all going to turn into technology companies. If we don't think we are now, we're definitely going to be in the future. Back to you, Anto. I think maybe there's some discussion in there if anybody's interested.
Yeah, I think maybe that's really the discussion once we get going for today.
Okay.
Once we get the intro, this is really spot on in terms of the changes that's going on right now. So great. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.
And your comment about AI being patient, I think it is. I guess it doesn't get annoyed with you if you sort of ask it the same thing over and over again. So yes, it doesn't say you're a stupid person.
It doesn't say you've said that before. You've said that 10 times before. It just says that you must think that's significant. It appears that this is significant because people are repeating themselves.
All right. So Linkport is as normal. Any other thoughts before we jump into our open conversation for today? Anything else going on? Hello, David. All right, hearing nothing. So a year of progress, and what I basically did was just this. I just went through and looked at all of the different themes that we've had this year, because this is basically the spread of what we've been talking about. We started in January talking about the Smarter Summit that was coming up in February, so that was kind of anticipating that, and we actually went through the sort of the motions of what we were preparing for the summit then. And then we jumped in February into operational technology, which is obviously what we do. That's the BAS, is OT. Then we spent the whole month talking about IoT and how that's different to OT. And then we spent another month talking about AI. So we went from OT to IoT to AI, which is actually a very sort of interesting 3 months talking about those three sort of big buckets of technology that is material today. And then in, what is this? This is in May now. We talked about the next chapter. I think we were just sort of reflecting on these three and talked about the business models and the potential business models and what that changes in this May conversation. And then in June, we talked about this notion that automation isn't the same as smart, which was our theme going into Realcomm. That was kind of our provocative session name for Realcomm that was very good at the end of the day. And then we came back after Realcomm in July, talking about silos and talking about how really the sort of the new integration challenges are really integrating between silos that exist in buildings. And then we had a really interesting month on buildings as assets. That's a completely new angle that we touched on with a lot of help from Mike Bordenera, which is, I see him on the call today. And then we spent a month talking about system of systems, which is very technical in nature. And we've just finished now talking about software, which is really the sort of the core, the essence of many of the driving forces in on this page, basically, and how that is basically eating buildings, which is a sort of a play on Mark Andreessen's comment that software is eating the world. That was very interesting. It was also very yummy because we got to talk about food and salad and stuff like that, which is also interesting. And that takes us to today. So we talked about a lot of stuff. And I'm not sure how to structure this other than what I've done. I've put it all here on the slide. I mean, I wonder what part of this past year has sort of been very pivotal to this group and also the audience, and people in the audience, if you want to chime in, just please on chat. But love to open it up to the floor. What resonates still?
Well, one thing that appears to me is that if you started with the Smarter Summit 24, can you maybe tip what you're thinking about for the Smarter Summit 25? That might be a good, because basically I assume you're going to include a lot of what's on the page.
In Smarter Summit 25.
Yes.
I think that's a safe assumption, right? Right.
Is it
Rick?
going to have the same
Although
title?
Smarter Summit 25. Yeah, just
Yes.
add another one. Add plus one. 24 plus one.
Like our passwords. Oops.
Yeah, but this and obviously the sort of the software angle that we've been focused on is quite likely going to be sort of a critical part of 25 from the perspective of this group, and maybe Rick wants to talk around that.
Rick, before Rick does, let me say a few things. Everybody, Anto, you guys can hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm really glad you put this slide together, Anto, because it you know, as a reminder for what we've done and said. And when my reaction to it, I see it as an evolution board. How is our industry evolving? And I feel like that's the question we've been in the entire year. And the way we've broken it down is in these buckets, if you will, different topics up, you know, what do we mean by operational technology, and which is more the traditional side of building automation and security systems and such. And then recognizing that in the past few years, a number of Internet of Things companies have come into this same space to attack specific things, but that maybe weren't being met by the traditional silos. But in doing so, they've introduced new approaches from a technology standpoint. And that was discussed and recognized during that session. And while all that's been going on, of course, there's, as we got into April, AI has sprung on all of us in a myriad of ways. And so we had really no choice but to acknowledge it for what it is, and to recognize that it was going to have a profound impact on our industry as well. So without, you know, going area by area, what I feel like we've taken a real concerted effort to try to describe the evolution of our industry from the perspective of what is going on, but more where we think it needs to go to answer the fundamental question of making buildings smarter. So our mission hasn't changed. It's to make buildings smarter and thereby make them more valuable as assets, more valuable to the people running them, or easier perhaps for them to do their jobs. And so from a mission perspective, I think we've been right on target by looking at what's been going on from a technology standpoint, from an evolutionary standpoint of the technology. And that's, to me, what the year has been about. And here we are. We've reached a lot of understandings. We've reached some conclusions, and I think it's very much guiding our path forward with regard to things like the IBB and the Cloud Native Foundation, of which we are participating. All of that is a fit in terms of how we respond to these evolutionary changes and needs that are illustrated in this one slide.
I think that's a great observation, that this reflects the broader industry discussion, and I think that's right. I mean, we've gone basically from OT to a very focused conversation about software in all of its meanings. So that's very interesting progress or direction.
Yeah.
Rick, do you want to chime in on the software side of things, or you want to do that later?
Do a little bit of it now, I guess. The you know, what Steve's describing as the technology change in the industry, and what Ken points out, and what I've been digging into, is that this same thing is happening in all sorts of different industries where technology is changing the industry, and more technology is software. So innovations, anytime there's something new, and there was somebody, the quote was that, oh gosh, somebody help me with the quote of you can't distinguish new technology from magic,
Yeah.
whatever. More and more, when people are talking about technology, they're really talking about the software that's making the magic happen. And throughout evolution of the industrialized world, there's different innovations that have dramatically changed the course of the economies, the course of countries, the course of everything. These days, those changes are really software, and sometimes hardware that's driven by software, but the magic is really coming from software. So, as part of what we're going to be doing at the summit will be focusing on the aligning that C4SP is doing with the Linux Foundation, and we're really adopting everything about what the Linux Foundation is saying, is that the acceleration of change is going to happen because of open source software, and because of the community coming together to share these advancements, rather than to hoard the different advancements that you could try and have inside of a walled garden. So a big part of the summit will be, talking about software, open source software, Linux related software.
Your comment that this is very similar to other industries sort of makes me think that you can even just look at the words I have up here. Other than buildings as an asset, obviously it'll be something else as an asset, and different, not the word building here, but other than that, you could probably map this onto agriculture or transportation or any other industry, right? That's the whole point. The trajectory is actually very similar, if it is not the same.
Yeah, that quote about the magic was actually attributed to Elon Musk by someone on LinkedIn, and I kind of borrowed it because it was the same kind of thing. It was the engineering and physics can be borderline magic at the highest levels, where the practitioners are blown away and marvel at their own creations. I mean, that's how I feel at times. Like, it's just we're unlocking capabilities that we never dreamed of from our own creations. And yeah, that really resonated with me.
So, what's your thoughts on this, Anno? Because you obviously are sort of in the middle of a lot of this from a very active organization. Would you say that this reflects roughly the sort of the path that you've been on?
Yeah, very much, right? I mean, and it's all, when you look at the whole list of stuff, it's in the space of the time that we've been talking about it and people have been doing it, right? You could pick any of these things, AI, IoT, just the whole software perspective, system of systems, automation is not smart. It's a little bit back to, I think it was Rick's point about open platforms. It's really been accelerating, right? I mean, it's everyone on this session and everyone listening in, these are, it's hard for even folks like me to keep tabs of everything that's going on in any one of these spectrums, right? I mean, just today, I had a meeting with a technology company that was all about AI, that was doing some really interesting and stuff, and what Keith's doing there in his world. I had a conversation with a company that's doing IoT solutions. It's going at a breakneck speed, and to kind of keep on top of it is one of our biggest challenges that we've got, because as much as it is for us to keep up to speed on what does this mean, what's the lingo, what are the benefits, what is the impact, what's the value propositions, trying to be able to explain that to end users, operators, facility managers, the whole gambit of folks that we all interact with, is no mean feat, because they're all coming from a little bit of a different perspective and a little bit different timeline on their path, et cetera, et cetera. And it's from my perspective, it's just amazing how fast this stuff is moving, right? And to keep ahead of the curve is not a trivial challenge. And the fact that we're here talking about this thing is kind of interesting to me, because where else do you go today, right, other than ChatGPT to help you out? Conferences aren't all that numerous in our space. They've got the steady stream of the usuals. We haven't seen a lot of new stuff. So yeah, it's just, these are all the things I deal with on a literally day-to-day basis, and context switching is not trivial. You're talking about an IoT solution and some technology that's doing some really compelling stuff, but that particular company hasn't quite yet put machine learning on it, right? And you go like, well, why haven't you? And they're like, well, we haven't got to it yet, but it's on our roadmap. That type of deal. And then you have to context switch to, system of systems, right? Go up a level and have to deal with, okay, I know, how does all this stuff work together? What's the value proposition and the impact of what that means, right? When my clients are talking about it. And then the last piece is, I see a lot of clients, end users, are grappling with this themselves, trying to do it themselves, got their own programs, initiatives, have managed to get some funds to do something, which is interesting. Back to Jim's, point, which we need to make on this slide deck as well. All great as long as someone's paying for it, right? And you've got someone who's got some funds to do it. There's still a lot of people wanting to do it, but wanting to do proof of concept, proof of values, show me, give me something that I can take to my management that says that, we need to do this. So the funding part is not yet solved. People have got the appetite, but the funding part is still a challenge. And then last one I'd put in, especially from our space, in the facility management space, change management. That's one of the hardest things that we deal with is change management of people like, I've been doing it this way for the last 25 years. Why do I need to do something different? Well, everyone left, right, center, up, down from you says you have to. So, oh, I don't want to. Okay, now how do we deal with change management within folks? In our space, that's not trivial either.
Yeah. And we typically look to the press to see what's going on, and trade mags. And so Ken, you're the closest person to that role here. And we've been obviously talking every week, and you've been sort of observing this change, and you're trying to align things. And I think we're all alignment seems to be going to be the challenge now, because Anna is right that there's lots of people, and we're all at different parts of the journey, different phases of the journey, different experiences, and that doesn't often work together very well. So we've got to align our sort of understanding.
I think it's all about communication, as always. Just we've all got a piece of the puzzle, and we're all running pretty fast. And what we really need to do is to start throwing our pieces of puzzle on the card table and see what the big picture looks like. And I think what I've got out of the group has been the press for Monday Live, which is nice, because ironically, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that it's a good opportunity for us to share the information and the wisdom of Monday Live. The bad news is that no other press is doing it, which is a bit concerning. So we need to get our message out, and we are having some success at that. And we're starting. What I see is that our readership is changing and our followers are changing as we start to move into the cloud native and the AI arenas. And it's coming back too. It's getting regurgitated and sent back as our sponsors are starting to share their take on it. And the best we can do is which was our original goal, was to allow the sponsors to actually express themselves and tell their story as it happens and how they want to present that. Again, and by using AI, I think they can clarify their messages quickly, and everybody seems to do that. They write their best shot at it, and then they run it through AI, and they get a few aha moments, and they bring that. So I'm excited where we are. It's not so much that we're doing great things, but I think we've got a vehicle that the industry can build on.
Wondering, David, what your thoughts are, because you come at this with a slightly different perspective, much more on the property. I don't know how to describe it still after these years talking to you, but
looking at it from a real estate asset owner and investor perspective. And we've had many calls where, all of this synergy is really great for owner occupied buildings like universities and hospitality and office buildings owned by large corporations that own the whole building. But as we reflect on the year, and we also look at the year to come, what investors care about is return on capital, yield on cost, net operating income, and hold time. And what does any of this have to do with that, and how does it help it? And at the end of the day, building efficiency is nice, but utility savings typically in an investment asset, all utility costs are passed on to the tenants. So there's that value story doesn't resonate necessarily, unfortunately. But when you look at things like improving tenant experience without spending a lot of money, differentiating the property from other properties in a competitive marketplace, lowering operations costs through headcount reduction, those are the things that start to get real estate investors very interested, because it's the headcount reduction and it's the supporting the same asset or same number of assets with a smaller headcount, or even better yet is adding more assets to your portfolio, but being able to support them with your existing staff and not having to increase headcount. These are where these synergies really can add value. But in most all cases, you have to have critical mass in order to realize that. It typically ends up being an economy of scale play. And this always makes me come back to the sub 300,000 square foot building that isn't big enough to have a facility engineer or full-time staff, probably even necessarily. And how can I see all of this technology being able to have a positive impact on smaller commercial buildings? And I know in a way I'm completely contradicting myself, but a lot of the times the owners of those buildings own 10 of them and are supporting them with 1 or 2 people driving around to all the buildings and doing the care and feeding. So I think the key to this all is looking at things from a portfolio or multiple asset perspective and leveraging the synergies between all of these systems and silos to gain efficiency in scale.
So one of the things, David, that most of us on this call has reflected on this slide is really the speed at which things seem to be changing. There is a sort of there is a speed thing going on here. I don't know how else to describe it. I think everybody's seeing it. But
it's
that
a
didn't,
velocity.
that is,
The velocity
there you go.
maybe is another.
That didn't
term.
that didn't come across in what you're saying, or are you seeing that in a different way at all, or is that just not relevant here?
Unfortunately, I mean, when it becomes a service that can be deployed across a portfolio, I think that's when the real estate investors will be able to see the value immediately and see the return on investment. But I don't think we're there yet. And this is why, as Rick has emphasized on prior calls, we need to work with owner occupiers, because that's where we can build these value stories now with existing technology and perfect how this is done, and then productize it to be deployed across portfolios for investors.
So I'm seeing a lot of traction in the utility industrial space, especially for our chiller optimization. I talked to a power and electric utility provider in the UAE last week, and they've got 200,000 tons of cooling. So I guess over there, like it's normal to do a district energy type of cooling scenario, and they are passing that cost on to their customers, of course. But where they see it as a profit center opportunity, because they can charge the same amount of money for delivering this chilled water, but they can optimize the heck out of it and make more margin off of it. So I mean 100,000 tons or 200,000 tons is ridiculous. I mean, so I'm very excited about that because I feel like we're at that, and David, you mentioned the economies of scale. Like I feel like we're at there's this hockey stick, right, thing, right?
Yep.
We're right
Yep.
there. And I feel like we're no longer resource constrained because of our engagement. I mean, AI has turned from, from a hobby, from a science project or whatever, to real meaningful engagement. And I mean, this, selling the service for like $1 a ton, like there's 300 million tons of cooling in the United States alone. So I mean, you start to get that economy of scale and that sort of thing where you're delivering at scale. So I see a lot of traction on the utility industrial side, especially with these large central plants. So I'm very excited for our future.
Keith, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're doing indoor downhill ski slopes and things like that.
Yes, that will do it. So, David, you mentioned, you sort of hinted at subscription is not really the reality yet, but we're getting there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, Steve, because you tend to focus more on sort of business models and business structures. Are you seeing in this sort of slide here and the sort of progress that we've made, have you seen progress in us or the industry adopting sort of SaaS type business models? Are we anywhere? Are we making progress there?
No, not really. Not to the extent that I've wanted to see. I think we have one of the challenges of SaaS is when it's done in the building associated with a piece of hardware, it can be much harder to sell that concept, simply because the hardware isn't expected to change a whole lot over time. And so it's viewed as a capital asset that, yeah, I maintain it. If it breaks, I fix it, right? But why should I keep paying for new software in that device if it's already doing 99% of what I want it to do? So whereas subscription in cloud applications are much more acceptable because that's what people are paying for today from an IT perspective. And they view sort of the constant evolution of those applications as as having value, right? And so that's the rub, if you will, is there a way to sell the value at the hardware level for our industry? And if not, let's be honest about it and not try to force customers to buy something they don't want to pay for. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing so far is sure, at the cloud level, at your tools perhaps, but you want to be clear that there's value in what you're providing, and we can leverage off the IT industry and how they do subscriptions today, which is all, predominantly all cloud-based.
That's interesting. The sort of the hardware, the physicality of this industry is extremely strong. It is really what the industry is, and what you're suggesting is that that's a fundamental thing that has to be considered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I'm curious what the other, panelists feel about that, but that's what I'm getting right now, and from our customers.
What do you think, Rick? What's your counter to that?
Well, we've had this discussion a couple times, and it's like when Tracy's not on here, but he was talking about the fact that his the person who runs his accounting does not like SaaS fees. She would rather have the box of diskettes that she can buy and run from software. Point is, this whole idea of software as a service is pretty new in every industry. Not just in accounting, not just and it's taken a while to take hold, but it is taking hold. So when we say that SaaS works in IT, well, that's actually really new for SaaS to be working in IT, because just not that long ago, Oracle didn't have a SaaS model. Salesforce kind of forced a lot of that on the industry, but it's being it wasn't that long ago that you went to the store and you bought a box of diskettes of software and you owned the software. You did not rent the software. And so the evolution of every industry to go towards more of a SaaS or more of a as a service. But I keep thinking our industry is the most as a service industry that there's ever been. It's called rent, real estate as a service. Somebody else owns it, and I just pay a monthly fee. So I don't think it's going to be that hard for our industry to adopt and change to be as a service, because a big portion of all the real estate on the planet right now is actually as a service. It's not a capital expense, it's a operational expense. Anyway, that's my ramblings.
So Rick, from the hardware standpoint, if the subscription wasn't solely around software, but was basically also gave you warranty protection on the hardware from an extended perspective, so that hardware warranties are typically 12 or 24 months or something like that, right? If I instead said, hey, here's my upfront cost, and annually I'm going to pay some percentage, right? But it not only gives me updates, but it also gives me essentially ongoing warranty protection for that device. And further, if down the road the device is no longer supported by the manufacturer, they then offer that customer, maybe at a one-time fee that's relatively small, to replace the device with the next generation. Now you have a subscription model for equipment that continues, like you said, from a rent standpoint. You're essentially renting the equipment for the life of the equipment, but you're paying so much every month for the equipment.
Yeah, and honestly, I think, maybe this is controversial to say, but the companies that right now are in the business of renting that service are trying to make 30 points of margin, maybe 60 points of margin. Whereas if I pay capital, I can bid everybody down to, I don't know, 5 or 7 points of margin.
Right.
And, am I kidding on that? I don't think I'm making that up. So there's people trying to get rich on the as a service model.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to work itself out, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because the economics are fundamentally different. And people, we all need to learn the difference and adjust our thinking and our expectations.
We're going to push the envelope on this next year. I mean, I feel we're finally in the position where we can experiment a little bit and try out new business models. So, I mean, one of the things I'm thinking of is that we're aligning ourselves with regional, smaller control contractors. We might just put the BAS in as part of the service. Like, don't even worry about it. We're just gonna put the BAS in. You treat him Honeywell trained, whatever your preference is. Our dealers can handle them all. They're whatever, and we'll put that in. It's just like your cable box. So no customer talks about what model cable box or how much it costs. It's just part of the service. So we're trying to push us into the point where the point of delivery is from the cloud through the BAS that happens to be installed. And so, I mean, we're really gonna try this out. I'm gonna fund this next year, and we're gonna see if we can have this kind of, basically reduce a control system down to a cable box.
And also a focus, or more of a focus, on software should make this process easier.
Absolutely, and we might even include the infrastructure, wireless and
Right.
or Ethernet infrastructure as part of that. So we skirt the whole IT conversation altogether. So it's great to starting to get some traction where we're no longer resource constrained after, thank God, 4 years of plowing through this thing. But I mean, now we've got a little bit of, breathing room where we can try. And it remains to be seen what the customers want. Who says that they want to buy their BMS and have it installed as a depreciating asset over 30 years? That remains to be seen.
So Keith, you're saying we in the context of your company.
Yes.
But can you also reflect on how far that we is, when you think about the industry? Are we getting there? Is the industry getting there?
I think kicking and screaming. I think that, I mean, we haven't had too much luck with the, major players. So we're gonna try this downscale. You go downscale to the regional smaller players that really are looking for some new kind of offering to kind of the level playing field with the big, the big 4 or 5 or whatever. But I don't think anyone's ever tried this, before to actually, like, building automation as a service or optimization as a service, and forget all the plumbing and stuff that goes in there. It's just incidental. You don't own it, it's ours. We'll come and upgrade it. We have free access. We'll upgrade it to Kimon's Anuma's. We would do it over the air, just like a Tesla. Like the car is incidental almost, because it's just a piece of software, a robot on wheels, as Elon Musk likes to put it. So yeah, I mean, it's great to be in a position to be able to have fun and try this stuff out and see what sticks.
So do you see any kind of trend that would support that in the industry, Ken?
I think the majors seem to be really reluctant to move into it. I agree with Keith on that, but we're starting to see the smaller, and I guess there's a big fight going on between central systems and individual systems too. So we're starting to see a lot more interest, and these I see them as being the leaders. They're starting to build software as an integral part. If we just imagine a heat pump and the remote control that goes with it, or whether you control it with your cell phone. And Asia has always been way ahead of us in that market. When you travel the world, you can't believe how we put our systems together and the way they put their systems together. They tend to believe more in the unitary individual system than they do the central system for various reasons. So I'm starting to see a lot of movement there in both Japanese and Korean air conditioning equipment. We're actually starting to see a whole bunch of things happening there. We're starting to see, different refrigerants evolving, and them actually making products. We're starting to see variable speed compressors, a lot of technology. They're more susceptible to adapting technology. They have the scale to do it, so they're building 1 million of these things. So if it seems to make sense, and we're starting to see them even in some projects. I've seen discussions as to releasing that information that would have been in the past proprietary inside of their cloud offering that came with their heavy metal. We're starting to see that to get a big project, to sell 1 million of these things, or to sell even 1,000, 10,000 of them, they're willing to unleash that information, and to start talking about what kind of standards should we be pushing this information back? And should people like Keith's thinking be part of that offering? So I think it's gonna grow from the unitary market. And I don't know what the majors are going to do. I think they're just kind of stalled right now. Interesting that Train is not exhibiting at AHR. I found that kind of an amazing thing this year. So
Yeah. And of course, timing is everything because, yeah, I mean, you have to have, I think the market has been sufficiently conditioned to be a little bit more amenable toward this subscription model. I remember at my first company, Silicon Energy, we came out with mybuilding.com. Like we were literally the first registrar of mybuilding.com and myfacility.com. I actually registered those in like 98 or something like that. And yeah, we just flamed out spectacularly. Like it was a total colossal failure. We didn't sell one customer on that because the idea of having a subscription-based building automation system was just so far out of the realm of possibility. But yeah, it's been 25 years. So I think yeah, now they're kind of ready for it.
So Tracy, thanks for joining. I know you had unavoidable reasons. That's fine. We're talking about obviously a recap of what we've been talking about this year. And about 15 minutes ago, we kind of got to the point where there's a realization that there's a lot of progress, there's a lot of technology progress and conversation progress, but we don't seem to be making much progress on the subscription model sort of business sort of concept. And we were just sort of discussing that. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think I agree with what Keith was just saying. If I can paraphrase, less reluctance. Is that what you were trying to say, Keith, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean we were both there. That's when I first met you, Tracy, back in 1998. I think a little bit of your experience with small box energy.
Yep.
It might be. I mean, that's exactly where you were going. And we both
Yeah, and you know, and we continue to this day, right? And you know, it's interesting just in the last couple years, even more so maybe in the last year. And the restaurant, talk about the restaurant side, the small business, restaurants, convenience stores, those kinds of freestanding operations typically. We have seen a few different models be introduced. There's a company right now that has a complete OpEx model where they will actually come in, replace your RTUs, replace all your lights with LEDs, any other hardware, capital equipment kind of thing that they can find, and then roll it all up into an energy like a performance contracting sort of a thing, where they are taking the majority of the documented savings for 10 years and doing it that way. And they're getting some traction. But I've heard the last couple shows I've been out that they're now starting to get some pretty negative reviews and feedback in that model because it's so restrictive to the owner and what they can do and can change and so on and so forth, which is always why I've tried to stay away from that. I've also encountered some more traditional ESCO performance contracting kind of stuff where they just, take a certain percentage of the energy savings, no equipment change out or anything like that. But it seems to be swinging back to just a traditional subscription is a better model for people in that industry. They don't have a lot of capital up front. Anything they can offset and move into an OpEx kind of thing rather than a CapEx seems, more amicable these days.
It's budget certainty. I mean, that's huge. We think about absolute price, but budget certainty is much more coveted than absolute price at the end of the day. They want budget certainty so they can forecast.
And that's been the darling child in the solar industry for for a long time, right? They go in and say, okay, you're paying exactly this amount much every month for the next 20 years, and you can fix your budget at that,
Yep.
right? So that's pretty common, like in university installs and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I think we're starting to see that barrier come down a little bit in terms of owners in that side of the business. We still see a big challenge in the bigger buildings from our end of the world in what we do. But that's kind of not surprising to me, right?
Yeah.
So
So
it sounds like innovation is required, and by the sounds of it, people are trying things out. So
yeah.
and it's just we just gotta let it all play out.
Well, it's I think what we're seeing is kind of a byproduct of just what's going on in the general population, right? In the consumer world, with as much focus as there's been on AI and things like that in the news. I mean, you can't hardly get through a day without hearing a story somewhere about something AI this or AI that or whatever. So I think there is a general sense or expectation that that stuff is happening and coming, and it's going to infiltrate everything. Every news story basically says that, right? So people are starting to get programmed to hear that and believe it and accept it, right? So I think socially, from that standpoint, things are lining up in our favor for new innovation, for new business finance models to happen going forward. So
That's maybe helped by the fact that AI is inherently an OpEx thing. You can't buy an AI. I
right.
mean, you could if you had a few $100 billion, but typically you don't.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And there's not a lot of people starting software companies to go sell software. One time it's all subscription, right? Everything is subscription. Every major, you can't get Quicken or QuickBooks or Word or anything anymore without a subscription. So, yeah.
Anto, that's and it's great for business because I mean now our cost structures are the same way. Like my resources in the Azure cloud are literally elastic. I mean, I know exactly how much it costs down to the penny for each byte of information that we send across the wire. So I mean, it's for as a business model, it's fantastic. And the accounting makes it very easy. So for the first time, our revenue structure and our cost structure are completely 100% aligned.
So we're coming up to, well, we've passed the top of the hour. Having so much fun here. Ken, do you want to do a quick wrap up?
Well, I was just going to add to what Keith was saying there too, is that it's a proven fact that companies that have the reoccurring revenue model are more valuable than other companies, and that's a lot of what when companies sell. That's a lot of what they're selling is the amount of their subscription service. So building virtual value, I think, is prudent and something we all have to invest in. I kind of also like the comment about there's just some stuff you can't buy except in a subscription, and like Word and 365 or Amazon services or all of these things. I think that's going to lead the industry to models that will reflect us selling things like indoor air quality, comfort. I think we've got to get back into that side of that kind of mental thinking. So that's part of the fork in the road I think I'm talking about. And the other thing inside of all of that is just a completely different way of doing stuff, that there's an opportunity. We often start off with our subscription model thinking this is how we're going to do it. We get halfway through it and we find out that it's even better than we thought. We've gained some gains there that we can actually capitalize on and maybe make an extra buck on.
So on that note, we're going to wrap this show. Thank you very much. This has been great conversation on reflecting
Yeah,
this
great
year.
conversation. Yeah.
And next week we'll see what 2025 is going to bring for us, and we'll no doubt come back to this SaaS conversation once more. But hope everybody has a great week this week, and we'll see you next week.
Good.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry it's late.
Bye all.
Bye.